Do you think about it?
Yeah.
Like when you sit at home in the evening, and you're like, it would be nice to have someone around.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like because we are in such a uber connected world, especially with internet, phones, the digital aspect of being so connected, yet we feel disconnected, is very real. The connection that we have, although instantaneous, is synthetic. Most of it is done through a screen, and a lot of people can get to a point where they are relying on that and feeling like that's more like the real world than the actual engagement with people. I have been there before, being somebody that works primarily with a computer. If you're spending a lot of time in front of a screen, and then you even in your off time, you spend a lot of it on your phone, and that's just not real connection. It can feel like it is, but it's fake. And then you're going on Instagram, or you're going on some app, or even if you're just texting people back, it's not real connection. It's severance. It's pixels on a screen, and you're getting some kind of an emotional response from pixels. And that can feel lonely because it's not spiritual. It's not a real connection.
Yeah.
And on top of that, what you're seeing can confuse you as to feeling like you're missing out on whatever everyone else is up to, because you're seeing all these highlight reels. You're seeing everybody getting up to stuff, and you might just be sat there on the toilet scrolling, like everyone's doing all the things, and I'm just sat here. So I feel like I've been through something like that before.
Yeah, and it's a lot of times such a wrong impression, right? Like behind closed doors, life's looking very different, even for the people that are with someone. And also, it almost seems like with all these social media apps, you have so much noise and you have so much buzz going on that this, like you say, this false sense of connection, which is kind of empty connection at the end of the day, a lot of times, makes the contrast to loneliness even stronger. It's like you have all this chatter around you all the time, and then you sit and there's no one with you, and then you have that stillness. It's almost more difficult now because you have so much noise going on. Back in the day, there wasn't so much noise. You're seeing a couple people here and there. You had a bit of TV, but now it's constant text message, email, bombarded, right?
So the contrast between those things is very, very big. Yeah.
I sense that also living in Vegas, and both of us living on the Strip. When you're single and you live on the Strip, you're constantly surrounded by masses of people. And people that come to Vegas come in groups. Boys come with their girlfriends, girlfriends come in groups, boys come in groups. And you're surrounded by constant groups that are companions. And seeing that, walking through that, being in the casino, for example, doing the type of work that you do in front of crowds where everyone is there in groups, kind of. And then you come home and you sit, it even makes that feeling of isolation bigger, because you have that illusion of there's only groups and couples around me. And then you're like, phew. I felt it was easier being in a small town in Germany, being alone, than it is here, because you didn't have as much of a contrast.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that.
So, how do you deal with that when a feeling comes up?
First of all, you got to get outside. You got to go and like, make a coffee date, go and meet somebody. Get off of your phone. I would honestly say that was a good start. I call my phone the Black Mirror. You know the TV show?
I love Black Mirror.
Supreme.
One of the best TV shows of all time.
But the actual theme of that show, the fact that technology is great, but it can lead you down a dystopian kind of perspective, like the problems with what technology can actually do and make us feel like we have to be a part of, taking us away from real organic. Again, I'll use the word synthetic, because as amazing as technology is, it's a tool and a utensil. It shouldn't replace genuine human connection. Like you can't get the same feeling that you can from a person from an AI. AI is wicked. Love it. ChatGPT me senseless. But I'm not going to get a heart attached to that. I'm just going to get strategy and analysis and optimization, which is great for efficiency in certain areas, but it's not good to get some kind of a feeling of actual realness.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's lonely, first off, I would say, are you on your phone a lot?
Which is such it's a paradoxical thing, because the instinct is you're alone. So distract yourself. Get on the phone. Get the noises in. And that makes it worse, which is so interesting, right? You do this and you're like, it even feels worse.
Yeah.
Because it seems like part of that question, what to do is rephrasing that question, what's wrong with loneliness?
This is true, because do you know what? Loneliness, I mean, is basically being with yourself. So you get to have a life with one person. It's you.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be with yourself till the end of time. You've been with yourself since the beginning of time.
Before that, beyond too.
Beyond and before. In the womb and back to the source. So you have an opportunity to be content with who you are. Loneliness is the disconnect from that.
And I would even go further than that. I would say it's a prerequisite for you to get to where you want to get in life. It's impossible without loneliness. So loneliness it's a gift if it's used properly. So I think the first thing would be to not try to beat it and distract yourself from it, but become comfortable with it. And realize that every master you can read of was first by themselves, lonely, and with their thoughts. And there is a reason for that, because if you try to distract yourself from that, essentially what you're confessing is that you are dependent on noises and opinions and situations around you to feel a certain thing. It takes you away from giving yourself those levels of consciousness, including those feeling states that you should be seeking within. The kingdom of heaven is within you. What does that mean? It means like it's not out there in the chatter. It's in there in the stillness. Stillness, the prerequisite for stillness is to be by yourself and to shut down your senses, the chatter, what you see around you. So the first step is really completely reframing that question and becoming comfortable with stillness and realizing that it's necessary for you. It's a good thing that you're alone. And then questioning, why is it that I'm feeling uncomfortable in stillness?
That's true.
Like, why is it? Why do you think it is? Like, when you're lonely, why do you think it becomes uncomfortable?
Trying to think back to when I was last feeling lonely.
Are you telling me you never feel lonely, bro?
No, I felt lonely many times, yeah. I mean, look, when I felt lonely, it's usually because I've been, overthinking too much. Being too concerned with what people might think of me. We would worry a lot less about how much people think of us if we realized how seldom they do. I think in those times of loneliness, it's advisable to, I mean, look, I want to say reconnect with yourself because that is what you need to do. The best way to do that is to do something that gets you a bit of energy. So physical acts are a good starting point. I would also suggest reconnecting with nature being a good one. Go out for a walk. Go be with some life. If you can't be around people, usually loneliness is to do with some level of not wanting to be around others as well. Like you choose to be lonely. So if you are feeling so self-conscious that you don't want to be around others, and you've imprisoned yourself into, but I don't want to, I'm going to stay in tonight. Like you just want to be on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Try and find the spark to at least go and be with some life. Whether that's trees, whether that's an animal. Like go to the pet store or something. Go on a walk where you can hear some birds. Sit with that and just breathe. It sounds so simple, but it's something that I think could really help. It has to start somewhere. Like you've got to break out of that shell. When you're cocooned in it, I would say you've got to just get into some sort of a place where you can feel that you're not enclosed. I feel like most people who are lonely are lonely in their environment because they've closed themselves off from outside connection, but also they're lonely in their head. They've made an assumption that they are not wanted or not worthy or not bringing enough to whatever the social situation or interaction could be, that they just assign themselves to staying in like it's going to go away. It doesn't. It gets darker.
Does it?
If you don't connect with outside light, that's one-way ticket to depressed mode. We are social creatures at heart. You've talked about this many times. If you go back to the beginning, and I mean the beginning of human interaction, like you don't get very far just doing stuff on your own. Before there was the opportunity to get on Amazon and order, way back, when we were in tribes, you couldn't do it on your own. So it's a need to be working in groups.
Yeah. Yes, I see what you're saying. But I still think there's being lonely and then there's being lonely. One is being lonely and suffering, trying to distract yourself. And one is being comfortable in loneliness whilst recognizing and realizing that we are social creatures. So I think being a social creature without finding comfort in loneliness is always going to make you dependent on that external connection to feel a certain way. So I still think you need to...
Okay, so you're still drawing the distinction between finding comfort in solitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I feel...
So loneliness versus solitude.
Yes, because I do agree. Like you go to the gym, someone calls you up, you make an effort to go. But you also need to become comfortable on your own. It allows you, and it only allows you in stillness, to master self to a certain extent. If you do it the right way, you're forced to look into your thoughts and what it is that is making you feel that way. So for example, for me, when I was lonely, it was, why do I feel that way? I asked you that. So what do you feel when you're lonely? And your response was something like, you also think about what other people think of you.
You feel like you're not enough.
Yeah. And so that's one perspective. For me, that was not so much an issue. Like I wasn't thinking as much what other people think of me, but it was more like I'm not feeling like I belong. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I am at peace. So it was realizing for me that I'm seeking feeling states that I'm currently not inhabiting. And I'm doing so, attaching those feeling states by being with a person in order to feel at peace, belong. And sitting with that, and also having a concept of, or working on a relationship with my higher self, with the divine, and the realization that the kingdom of heaven is within you. Be still and know that I am God. Knowing that the answer is here. It's not out there in the world. And putting myself, or proactively working on putting myself in a position where I give these feeling states to myself, independent of being lonely and without a person, will ultimately allow me to find the right person. Because the other way around, there is a huge risk involved. And the risk is I'm just out there to connect for the sake of connecting and not being lonely. And that's both for relationships as for friends. And realizing that a lot of times actually going out just for the sake of it, for not being alone, it almost made me feel lonelier than being alone at home. Because I would go out and I would be like, man, it's like, I just don't feel connected to them. Like what I'm getting out of that group of friends or what they're doing, a lot of times going out and drinking too, right? And then the day after, you feel even lonelier than before because it was a short-term distraction. It was essentially like a drug that you took to take yourself out of that misery for 5 hours, only to realize the day after things are even worse. And that's because I didn't sit long enough to figure out in my mind what it was that I was trying to get through relationships, something that I wasn't giving to myself. And the other thing in relationships is, and I've seen that with a lot of people, when they're in a relationship and they get out of that, the first thing they do is like, I have to get back into a relationship. I have to get back into dating. Let me go hit this, do this, reach out to them. It's almost like they cannot be alone. When they're alone, those noises from within are too loud. So in order to put the volume down or mute that voice, they go out on the market and take the next best person to be in a relationship with. But they're doing that fully out of need, and that need stems from their inability to sit with themselves in stillness. So I think a prerequisite for any happy relationship, friendships and romantic relationships, is to master self through sitting in stillness. So I would, my first response would be get comfortable with it. Don't fight it.
Yeah, excuse my language. I fucking agree. There's so many facts you just said there. It absolutely has to start with yourself. You have to get comfortable with it. Yeah, you're right. Don't fight it. Accept it. Realize it. And then try and get to the root feeling of that. The thing is, though, and I'm only going to say this because I want to challenge you on that. When you're so emotionally charged, one way or another, versus you're a very practical, logical, rational thinker. So when you get to a point of feeling lonely, you may be able to realize, be aware enough that, okay, I'm feeling lonely. How do I deal with that? Okay, I should learn how to accept that and be still with myself, and it starts with me. If you're not that type of a person and the loneliness has taken over and its seed has spread to the point where you can't rationally think yourself out of it, you can't see the light beyond the trees, what do you do then?
By the way, I've been to places like that and beyond. Even as a rational thinker, we're all, the emotional part of us is older than the rational part. The prefrontal cortex came last. It was the reptilian, and then the reptilian brain, then it was the emotional part of your brain, and then it was the prefrontal cortex. So being hijacked by emotions is normal for everyone, unless you have some type of brain damage. But for most people, they go through that, including myself. And I think part of me was realizing that going against the nature of and flow of life is only going to make it more difficult. So if you look at loneliness, being alone. Loneliness has a negative connotation really for no reason. It's just you being with yourself. When life gives you that and you look at it as an opportunity rather than a burden, then you can mold to that situation. So in the beginning, I was exactly doing the same thing that I was referring to earlier. I was getting drunk, going to the clubs, getting drunk, going to the clubs, hitting up all my friends, be out with friends where I felt like I didn't really have my consciousness and my spirit involved and evolved by being part of that dynamic, only to come back home and be like even more miserable. Until I realized that if I take that loneliness as an opportunity, if life gives that to me, let's even go deeper into that. Because knowing that going into loud chatter just to not hear that voice within is, we intuitively know it's the wrong thing. If I told you, hey, you feel lonely, go out, get drunk, go in the club and just blast your brains out. Intuitively, you know it's not the right thing. So what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is to be even stiller and more with yourself than you ever were before. So I went from that level of feeling lonely to literally sitting in silence and stillness and meditating to a degree where I went exactly on the opposite pole.
Was there a catalyst to that then?
It was reading. It was reading and knowledge. It was literally just...
You read some books on like, how do I get out of this?
Audiobooks, man. I didn't like to read books. It was audiobooks. It was me. It was realizing that going out and doing the opposite was worse. The day after was worse. It was a spike for 4 or 5 hours, like going crazy, this, that, shots. And then next day it was even... You know how it feels when you get drunk? You're in a club with a bunch of people and everyone is like, and then you wake up the next day hungover, alone. That feeling is even worse.
Double alone, yeah.
Bro, that was a killer for me. And for me, it was conceptualizing or having a relationship with my higher self that allowed me to overcome that and transcend that. To realize that what I'm seeking in this three-dimensional realm is an illusion. Whatever that three-dimensional realm gives me, it can take away from me. So I understood that I'm making myself dependent on other people, whether it's a girlfriend, whether it's a friend, whether it's a group of friends, whether it's alcohol, whether it's the club, whether it's noise, to feeling a certain way within. And I acquired enough knowledge to know that you seek the heaven and the kingdom of heaven within you first, and what that actually means. And the fact that everything we want is inside of us, but to reach that place where you can feel that inside of you, you have to create a relationship with the divine. And with the divine, I don't necessarily mean God in a traditional sense. It could just be with your awareness, with your consciousness, with putting yourself in a state of slow brain waves where you slow down all the chatter and you just are, and you just realize that everything is there. But until you do so, you're trapped in that illusion that only out there are going to be the things and the people and the feelings and the situations that cause those feelings or give you that feeling of peace, serenity, belongingness. That's the trap. That's the illusion. That's the imprisonment. Because until you realize that in order for you to really get that, you have to be that. And to really be that and become that, you have to put yourself in that state independent of any externalities. The externalities and that life that resembles what you hold within will follow. But you cannot go to the world, which is the plane of effect, and expect the plane of effect, the plane of illusion, to give you that which you're so deeply seeking. Knowing from, if you look at any spiritual text, including scientific research and psychology, knowing that how you feel is going to dictate how your life goes, how people react to you. Now we know from the Joe Dispenza research, literally you have an electromagnetic field around you that is dependent on how you feel. So if you can feel a certain level of elevated emotion, you will then write your story and your life around you based on that. And you can only get to that by giving that to yourself. So it was that realization which started with educating myself and reading on that stuff. And then subsequently, you will align and meet very different people, because in that state of pain and loneliness, the frequency of people that match with you is very different, because all you see from that frequency of pain is opportunity to get out of that pain. So if it's the guy that gets you drunk in the club, or the group of friends that gets you drunk in the club, you see that. But the moment you flip that switch and you realize that it's within you, all of a sudden you see around you now social interactions or opportunities for social interactions that genuinely allow you to level up rather than masquerade that hole. And that's a process, and that's you work your way towards it. There's no quick fix for that. It's a necessary stepping stone in your journey, and until you take on that perspective, you will suffer. And until you take on that perspective, you will enslave yourself to the three-dimensional realm, which includes circumstances, events, and how people think about you and react towards you.
Yeah. We've said this before with you tie your happiness to happenings in that.
I love that.
In that way.
Yes.
What were you listening to at the time that helped you break out of that?
Let me think what I started with. A lot of it was Nero on YouTube, like the Nero Knowledge podcaster. A lot of it was Jordan Peterson. It was his books. Maps of Meaning was the one of the first heavy books that I read, and how really the psyche works. It was Affective Neuroscience by Panksepp, which speaks about the evolution of the brain. So it was really understanding the mechanicals in me of why I feel like that. Really, knowledge helps you to get a grip on things. It's funny that the rational helps you to make sense of the feeling states, which allows you to transmute the feeling state, and you do that through knowledge. And it was just becoming aware of what is going on, and from there create a map for myself of what I need to be doing and staying true to that. If you read and educate yourself to that extent that you just know that there is a right way of doing this, and it's not going out and drinking, and it's not going and meeting that and that and that, and doing all of these, putting all of these band-aids on your wound. Yeah. Really, that's what you're doing, right?
Short-term dopamine hit.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it was just from there. And then from there, I started reading more religious texts. I started looking into the Bible, a little bit into the Quran. I'm still learning about the Quran. Actually, some of my friends were saying, dude, you reference a lot of Bible stuff. Can you refer to the Quran? I just don't know enough about the Quran. But ultimately, all these texts are so similar. The gist and the essence of it is all the same. It's all within you. Don't fall prey to the three-dimensional realm. What did the devil say to Jesus after he was fasting for 45 days and he didn't have anything to eat and nothing to drink on the top of the mountain? He was telling him, look at all of this around, all these kingdoms around. I'll give you everything. I'll give you the entire three-dimensional realm. Everything you see. All you need to do is pray to me, bow down to me. He says, away with you. I already have everything. And that's exactly that. Everything is within. And as long as you enslaving yourself to thinking that this is what you need, those visible kingdoms, the stuff that you see with your eyes, you are making yourself trapped, imprisoned. You need to break down out of that. For me, it was conceptualizing the divine that helped me do that.
Did the books tell you that then?
It led me to that.
Led you to spiritual connection?
Yes. So it was literally just that seeking aspect that I think we all hold within us that was opened up. The seeking part of it, right? And trying to make sense of, is this really what it is? Like, is life just like that? Am I just being like, is it like a piano, like boom, 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 boom? But then at the same time, no, man, there's a certain level of self-mastery, and where does that come from? And spiritual text all says the same thing, man. The Buddha was alone. He was meditating. He was the same. what does it say? The wise man is the same in joy as in pain, something like that. And that resonates with us. It resonates with us, but then we just like go about our day again. We forget about it. But immersing yourself into it is helpful.
It's interesting because I think that is certainly been the prerequisite for me as well. Spiritual connection. And some people have an issue with the word spirituality because they connect it to religion. But spirituality can easily be replaced with belief in connection, energy. It can be an understanding that there are planes that you can reach, dimensional feelings, frequencies that are higher than where you currently are. If you can feel loneliness in the negative connotation as the disconnect from who you know you are, you can realize that you can transmute that feeling and that you can reach another energetic frequency. So many books have helped me get through the same sort of a thing. Specifically, my book that helped that feeling for me was The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
Can you elaborate? So
same sort of thing, connection to the divine, an understanding that there is what we would call intuition is a kind of guidance system. People call it all sorts of different things. God, North Star, the compass that guides you, intuition. It's to know that is there with you, inside of you, surrounding you, much like, it's just there. It's always there. That's always accessible. Even if you feel that you're the only person that's feeling this way, you still are connected to that. And you can find solace in that.
When you have that also, you'll never be lonely. You have something with you at all times. Right?
100%. That can be the thing that you talk to as well, to give you the feeling of like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And you find that in silence.
You do.
Way more than you find it in a noisy room or, when I go to church and then there's a congregation of people, again, like you can go back from that afterwards and then feel very quiet. But you've still got that connection. You can still find that at any point, just sitting in silence.
Yeah, and the challenge for that can be, though, taking that home with you and having that not just on Sundays when you go to that church for an hour, but to have that at all times. And when the pastor is not speaking to you and you don't have that breath of inspiration in your ear at all times, like that's where your faith gets tested, right? And it's so interesting when it comes to addictions. And addictions are essentially the same thing, because addictions are you're going to the three-dimensional realm and you're taking something in order to change your internal state. You're feeling something because you're taking something externally. It's no different. It's the same thing, like being with people or doing things in order to feel a certain thing. Really, like the meaning of it is the same. And the most successful intervention when it comes to addiction is spirituality and finding a connection with the transcendental, with God. Yeah. That has the highest rate of success. When you go through these what are they called? These programs that you go to?
Yeah, like AA, all those kind of things. They all have that part of it.
Because the data is so good on you actually overcoming your addictions by creating a relationship with the divine and with God. And it doesn't necessarily have to be religion in a traditional sense, like you say. For me, it wasn't. Like I read the Bible not as historical text, but as an abstract meaning. Like for me, it makes sense in a different way. But really, spirituality from a definitional perspective, it comes from the Latin word spirare, which means to breathe. So a spiritual person knows how to breathe. Now, why is it important to know how to breathe? Think about it. When life hits you and you feel a certain way emotionally, how can you regulate your emotional? So first of all, what happens when an external event happens which changes your internal balance? You react emotionally. You're stressed and anxious. So what happens is your heart rate changes, it goes up. Your breathing becomes faster and more shallow, and your sweat glands are opening up. You're sweating more. Now, how do you regulate that response? What will every therapist tell you when you have a panic attack? You have to breathe. So out of those 3 physiological responses, you have access to the breathing aspect of it. So when you know how to breathe, you are regulating that emotional response, meaning the external event that formerly would trigger you to feel a certain state, by you becoming aware of your breath while that happens, you're regulating yourself, meaning you're regulating your emotional response, meaning you're recentering yourself within, meaning you're a spiritual person because the external environment is not dictating your internal state anymore. So whatever conceptualization of God it is, or the divine, that allows you to find peace, that's going to be a relationship with God that serves you. Otherwise, what you're going for is make-believe. If you have a concept of God that does not allow you to get a grip on reality, when I say grip on reality is feel balance when life throws at you curveballs left and right, then it's time to question it, to find a relationship that makes sense for you. And that's why it doesn't have to be religion in the traditional sense. It can be consciousness, awareness. It can be imagination. It can be any practice that allows you to feel peace. I think that's the cornerstone of any belief. If that conceptualization that you have with the divine is allowing you to feel centered and peaceful amidst turbulence around you, then you have a useful relationship with the divine.
Totally agree, especially when it comes to breathing. I mean, look, that can be meditation, that can be breath work, but it is the point to be self-regulating in a way which is beneficial and you control, not self-regulating with some external substance, right? But like most people, or I mean, it's probably not right to say most people, but generally, we look to self-medicate some way or another. A lot of people, that'll be food. Some people, it's going to be drinking. Some people, it's going to be drugs. But when we realize that we can self-regulate and self-medicate ourselves with only our breath, most people are going to be like, you shut up. You're just a new ager. No, man, you can. Think about David Blaine. Like, you might joke about that, but the guy controls his breathing to a point where he can lower his heart rate, and then he can stay underwater for 15 minutes. And that's not magic. That's him controlling his body, controlling his mental state, and bringing his consciousness to a point where he is so relaxed that his organs aren't using as much energy in his body. You can do that. Everyone can do that. Well, maybe not everybody. You've got to do a lot of training to get to the point where you're underwater. Don't try this at home.
I'll do it in the ice bath tomorrow.
But the point remains. It's possible. And you can get there with controlled breathing. Wim Hof is a perfect example of that as well. You did it last podcast. Like, you want to get into a state, you can do controlled breathing before football, where you can psych yourself up, and you can also bring yourself to ultra calm.
It's so, dude, that's facts, man. By the way, you can do all of that with breathing. You can hype yourself up. You can cool yourself down. You can regulate yourself emotionally. You know, you can override your amygdala response and have your prefrontal cortex involved purely by changing your breathing, which in turn changes your heart rate, which in turn changes your brain chemistry entirely. And you can even, dude, one thing I realized the more I became aware of my breathing when I get nervous or something happens around me that would be stressful, when you control your breathing, you can't feel that physiologically. It's not possible. Like, if you control your breath, you actually cutting off that cord that would make you feel stressed is just not possible. So, you know, you said...
It also gives you something to focus on as well.
Absolutely.
Specifically, doesn't it?
100%. And it's crazy because when I started to go deep into meditation, sometimes I do like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hour sessions, when you want to get deep into the meditative state, it's so funny, man, because meditation teaches you everything about life. When you do it long enough and you're aware enough in that meditation, you learn everything about life. So in the beginning, when I started to get deeper and deeper and deeper, when I would lose my sense of self, I would get excited. I'm like, oh my God, this must be now where these geometrical patterns are going to come. Like I was deep, like I'm saying an hour in, and I already realized my breathing became fast. My heart rate went up. So I was doing the opposite. I was getting too excited. So it's the same thing. Like when we say in the three-dimensional realm, you shouldn't get too excited about positive feedback or too sad about negative feedback. You should stay the same. You should stay regulated. And to stay regulated, you're breathing in a cohesive pattern, right? It's the same thing in meditation. For me to go one level deeper, and I think I'm still far away from where people say their pineal gland is opening up and they see all these patterns. But I'm getting pretty deep, man. Like I lose the sense of self. I feel like I'm in a sensory deprivation tank. That's kind of the level that I'm getting to right now. But I'm getting there by not getting excited when I feel like I'm getting deep into the meditative state, by reminding myself that let's stay balanced. Let's stay balanced. And in real life, it's the same thing, man. Like the quicker you become aware of what's going on when you're reacting emotionally, the quicker you're realizing that your breath has changed. And because of that, your heart rate has changed. And because of that, you start sweating. The quicker you cut that cord, you regulate your breathing, bring your heart rate down, just like you said, Blaine does. And the more centered and peaceful you stay. And the more you've mastered self, because now things around you are happening and you're not reacting to it. So that makes you a spiritual person.
That might be the number one thing that you can do.
100%.
And the most readily, easily applied, most practical first thing you should try.
And I would add something to that because the emotional response is so strong, because it takes over, it hijacks your brain function. Getting to the state when you react emotionally where you're aware of your breathing requires some training. So in the beginning, it was extremely, you forget, your brain doesn't even get to the point where you become aware of your breathing. You just react emotionally. But the more you learn about it and you practice it in smaller situations throughout the day, when it's not super crazy, but you feel like, oh, the car cut you. It's a bit easier than, your girlfriend or your boyfriend, some crazy thing happened or some crazy thing on the job happened. The smaller things, the more you become aware, the small fluctuations in your breathing, and let me bring it back immediately and practice it, the more it will allow you to do this when these bigger challenges happen around you. Otherwise, your emotional response will overwrite your awareness. You need to educate yourself and train yourself to the extent where you allow your awareness and consciousness to override everything else.
I think you've opened up a new understanding for me here, actually, funnily enough. I know we were talking about loneliness, but I think what it actually is whatever the feeling is that's attached to that, and then to repurpose that. So whatever the feeling state is, you can get to a point where you become aware of it. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling, insert the word. Okay. If you can get to the point where you at least are able to identify that you feel a certain way, then you can go, hang on a minute, let me regulate myself. Whether it's through meditation, breath work, or whatever the thing is. If they can do that in that moment, you can get to a point where you understand that you are in control, not the feeling. And then you can regulate yourself into a feeling of less loneliness. Mm-hmm. And that is the step in the right direction towards, I'm okay. I'm myself. I'm a divine creature. Yeah. I am, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can begin to, it's good. Okay, right. Move forward. Next thing. Yes. And build on that.
When you get to that, you broke out of the pattern of allowing that external circumstance to dictate how you feel, and you became aware of it and you regulated it yourself. In the Bible, it says, let the weak men say, or let the weak people say they're strong. What does that mean? Someone who is weak might feel vulnerable, might feel not at peace and insecure. What does a strong man feel? Secure, at peace. But they also say, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and be still and know that I am God. So for the weak man to say that he's strong, he needs to do that from within. And he can't just say that, he needs to feel that. And in order for you to feel something that externally is not currently displayed, but the opposite is displayed around you, which is stress, you need to shut your 5 senses off. You need to be still. And from that stillness, you are able to create that feeling state that resembles the opposite of what it is that life is throwing at you at that moment. That's why the weak man can say he's strong, but only as long as he gives it to himself through the kingdom of heaven within, only as long as he is still and he realizes who and what God is. And it's not something that you talk to, it's a state of consciousness that you become. And when you become that, when you feel that, you become that. The feeling of the language of the universe is feeling. When you feel that, you become that. When you become that, you already have that. And the world can only give you what you already have. So the universe is registering you're peaceful, you have that, you're centered. So the life around you will slowly then mirror the internal state that you've accomplished to give to yourself. And then you realize that, it is actually the within that causes the without. But as long as you're trapped in that illusion that this is what you need to feel this within, life will always reflect exactly that scenario back at you.
That's why it needs to be a practice as well. It needs to be a regular thing. Because you can't think that you just breathe your way back into feeling comfortable. It's got to be, if you feel weak and you want to be feeling strong, then you need to approach that every day. You need to sit with that feeling. Like you said at the beginning of this talk, you need to accept it, not try and fight it. You need to realize, oh, okay, I'm feeling this way. Right. What's the step that I can take? Perhaps it's this, perhaps it's that, whatever it is. Choose your thing. Engage in it. And do it diligently and do it each day. It could be going to the gym. It could be going for a walk. It could be communicating to a loved one or somebody that you feel comfortable enough to speak to. It could be sitting with your breath.
And it's very likely a combination of everything you just said.
Yeah. That's one way of approaching it.
All right.
All right, brother.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.